next time.
Mr. Mayor, while they're getting their technology going here, I would like to recognize this group for something that I look for often, and that is kind of closing the feedback loop. We voted for this, the previous council voted for this a while ago, and now here we are some time later with a report as to what actually happened with that investment, and the fact that, you know, how many people were impacted and vegetables, et cetera. I think it's wonderful to have this kind of information. So I really appreciate this, and I was one that supported it and took untold amounts of grief from people sitting around me for supporting it, but you know, it's good that I think it's really nice that it worked out. And I'd like to know how I can get my plot for next year. Just kidding.
There's even hope for staunch conservatives like you, Bob. This is
That's
great
right.
news.
See,
Well-
we do have a heart. Yeah. We aren't those insensitive people that get elected to the Auburn City Council.
Hey, speak for yourself, Bob.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, we're sorry for your grief, but I hope that tonight we can expound upon some of the good things you seem to have noticed about the project and answer any questions you have. So, hello, Mayor and councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. We'll try to keep it brief. I know we're approaching the 7 o'clock time period. My name is Sherry, and I'm the Program Development Coordinator with the St. Mary's Nutrition Center. And the goal of the presentation is to provide a brief summary of the activities led by the St. Mary's Nutrition Center as part of the commitment to the City of Auburn to provide planning and oversight for the creation of a community garden at 61 Webster Street in Auburn. We'll review the purpose and origins of the project, the coordination and community engagement needed to implement it, as well as key outcomes, milestones, and stories. And we'll make sure to leave questions for the end of the presentation, but obviously if any come up during it, please feel free to ask. And we'll be providing highlights briefly, but details are in the report which you received last week and can be referred to throughout if need be. And I realize I went ahead and didn't introduce so here are my cohorts if they want to introduce themselves quickly.
So Shelley Kruszewski, Conservation Director at the Androscoggin Land Trust and also a member of the Auburn Community Garden Initiative.
My name is Karis Heisey, and I live in downtown Auburn, and I'm the Auburn Community Gardens Coordinator.
Okay, so just to give a brief overview again, because I know some of you have joined after the project began, but the project period was the fall of 2015 through the fall of 2016. The St. Mary's Nutrition Center led the project as part of what we call the Auburn Community Garden Initiative, which we'll refer to a little bit later. And this was a continuation of some initial research, planning, and assessment conducted by the Nutrition Center between July of 2014 and 2015 to just see how community gardens would work here. The purpose was to create a community garden at 61 Webster Street that provides opportunities to grow fresh, healthy foods, enhances community interaction and involvement, improves the quality of life of residents, reaches individuals at risk for food insecurity, and beautifies the neighborhood. And the garden was known as the Webster Street Community Garden, which I'm not sure was mentioned. The scope of work, here's a high-level overview of the scope of work, and as you can see, it includes activities related to constructing the garden, but also many more related to building, programming, and community buy-in and support. Here are the goals. These goals were identified as priorities and included in the memorandum of understanding between the Nutrition Center and the City of Auburn, and also put forth in the original proposal for gardens in Auburn. The goals are far more exciting next to the outcomes, we think. And as you can see, overall, the project exceeded anticipated outcomes, and results were higher than typical for a first-year garden. For example, 90% of gardeners completed the growing season, and more than 85 volunteers were engaged. So what does this mean? Overall, there were positive impacts on individual health, neighborhood integration, community support and building, and concrete skills for people to lead healthier lives were cultivated. A goal not listed here, but on which these outcomes are dependent, was the transformation of the vacant lot at 61 Webster Street into what we believe was a beautiful, functional, and sustainable garden space. It's always nice to see those photos side by side. So what you see before you on the left was transformed into a garden with a durable chain link fence, sturdy wooden raised beds, including 2 designed to be accessible for people with mobility impairments. There were mulched pathways and a tool shed. As a reminder, the site was chosen because of the close proximity to existing community hubs, which were easily accessible for gardeners and residents, easy site development, water access availability, and because of the positive community response and interest in the site. So we had canvassed the neighborhood, and people were really interested in seeing a garden right there.
So the strong collaborative model of the Auburn Community Gardens Initiative was integral to the project's success. In addition to the core ACGI members indicated in the logos that you see here, committed Auburn residents were part of the team as well. All members of the ACGI provided advisory support for the project design, development, and implementation, as well as fundraising. Each member brought distinct strengths and assets to the initiative and shared an organizational and personal commitment to the positive and transformative power of community gardens. Also critical to the success of the project was the on-the-ground support from Auburn Community Gardens Coordinator, Karis, who was hired to support the creation and management of the Webster Street Garden. In addition to strong collaborative engagement through the ACGI and on-the-ground support from committed staff, success of the Webster Street Community Garden would not have been possible without valuable community partnerships. Some of those key partnerships include Auburn Police Activities League, or PAL Center, Tedford Housing, and Androscoggin Head Start. With seed funding from CDBG, we were able to leverage more than $16,000 worth of additional support from Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare Foundation, the National Park Service, Fiskars, and significant in-kind donations. Examples of these donations of materials and labor include Whiting Farm, who donated seedlings, alongside area businesses such as Blaze Flowers, Reggie's Sales and Service, and Gilson's Farm. The youth-centered projects of Goodwill Northern New England's Take Two and the Lewiston Regional Technical Center were responsible for the construction of the raised garden beds and garden tool shed, respectively. Project success and sustainability not only depends on strong partnerships, but on community buy-in and support. The ACGI engaged neighborhood residents early in the development of the garden. We canvassed and had conversations to gather input. We invited prospective gardeners to volunteer work days. We held outreach meetings in the neighborhood for people to learn more and sign up for garden plots. We worked with the recreation department to spread the word about the garden and to sign gardeners up for their plots. All of this engagement helped foster a greater sense of ownership over the garden. The level of involvement from partners, gardeners, and volunteers has been a strong indicator of the level of community support for the garden and the overall project. To bring all of the people together that helped make the garden possible, ACGI hosted a ribbon cutting event. You can see a great picture here. The event was attended by city officials, funders, community gardeners, Auburn residents, garden supporters, and the local media.
With most projects, there are many steps to achieving an end goal. So here are some milestones that led up to that great celebration, the launch of the garden and other key activities over the course of the season. Another celebratory event held later in the season, which brought people together, was the Gardener Potluck in September. And because not everybody, but Karis and a few others were with the project day in and day out, we wanted to share some photos of what the evolution of success looked like on the ground, as it was a pretty remarkable transformation with lots of people helping out. And as you may have guessed from some of the photos and the quotes throughout the report and this presentation, the value of this project and the Webster Street Community Garden is greater than outcomes and milestones. There are many meaningful stories that can't be captured in numbers. The garden is like a living, breathing organism itself, teeming with life and with personality and character of its own. It is a place where you can witness nature's beauty, small and big. So to conclude our presentation, Karis is going to help paint a picture of the Webster Street Garden, share the stories and its impact on the people who orbited around it and grew and learned through it.
I feel lucky because I get to play in the garden every day and then come tell you guys about it. One of my favorite things about the Webster Street Garden is that it's a place where people come together in a lot of different ways and to meet a lot of different needs. And a good analogy for this is for one of our favorite living beings that comes to the garden. His name is Garden Kitty, that's what I call him. And he comes to have good company and interact with people sometimes. Sometimes he comes to try and find a snack. Sometimes he comes to rest and lay in the shade and just hang out. And those are a lot of the reasons that people come to the garden too. And as such, all my gardeners have different names for him. Some call him Webster, some call him Garden Kitty, some call him Sir Caddington, or one of the kids calls him Blackie. There's like 4 or 5 different names at least for Garden Kitty. But I feel like he's a good example of just sort of what a space that's present does for people to bring us together in a community. The garden's a really great safe space for kids. I held open garden hours every week, and kids from the neighborhood learned that they could come and get a little snack of a tomato or whatever, and maybe water something or play with bugs or whatever, and that it'd be a safe space to be in our neighborhood. We had so much food this year, especially tomatoes, that we ended up having a free table inside the garden to share with each other. And then when we couldn't eat all those tomatoes, we started a free box outside in front of the garden. So I hope you guys will all come shop there next year. We'll have less tomatoes because every gardener says, I'm not planting so many tomatoes this year. We had too many. And it brings together neighbors who might not have necessarily known each other too. There's one day, one of my gardeners said, this lady came up to the fence and we didn't speak the same language. She was speaking French or something and I only speak English. And she wanted something and she indicated through pointing that she wanted a tomato vine. And my gardener and I were both puzzled. Why would this lady want a tomato vine? They're not yummy. They leave green stuff on your hands. And the lady came back a few weeks later and I talked to her, and I also don't speak whatever language she was speaking, but she indicated she uses it as a poultice for her back, for back pain. So she learned, she wasn't one of our gardeners this year, but she learned that she could come to the garden to get something she needed to care for herself and her family. So that was cool. And then another story that I love is really 2 people's stories of Audrey and Connie, who are both elder neighbors in the neighborhood, or were at least when the garden started. And they didn't know each other, even though they lived about half a block away, but they both were experiencing a lot of life transitions and came to the garden as a way to do something new in their lives. And in the course of a year, both were just so proud of their garden. Connie loves her picture with the mayor at the ribbon cutting. She moved to a nursing home this year, and it's actually her bookmark for her book that she reads while she's in the nursing home. And Audrey
I still have the little fairy she gave me.
You have her little garden angel. Oh, I'm gonna tell her that when I go visit her. Audrey had grown tomatoes with her husband, who she lost in the last year, but she came to the garden wanting to grow tomatoes, and she also grew this broccoli, and she's so proud of her broccoli. And they became friends, and they're discussing at the harvest potluck. I went and brought Connie back from the nursing home for the potluck, and they were talking about what to do with her blueberry bush and how to get it through the winter. And still, when I talk to Audrey, she says, "How's Connie? How's she doing in that nursing home? I wish she'd get in a better nursing home." And when I talk to Connie, she's like, "How's my garden doing? How's Audrey?" And they're buddies, even though they don't even live in the same neighborhood anymore. The garden brought some people together that are good friends, and my good friends. So those are just a few examples. I could tell you guys all night stories about the garden, but we sure love it, and it's beautiful and colorful, and yeah. Do you have any questions? Did I forget anything?
No. I can finish up.
Okay, okay.
I mean, I think we sure love the garden, and we sure love Karis, because I think if the garden had a soul that was embodied in a person, I think it would be Karis. So you can ask any one of the people there. We're super thrilled to have Karis help them out this year. So the big question is, continuing the bounty, or not a question, but something we're looking, towards doing. And we are obviously really excited about the sort of harder numbers, the outcomes that we were able to look at from this project, but also obviously the types of stories and more qualitative, but equally as important experiences that the garden produced that we couldn't quite quantify. We were really excited by the level of community interest, engagement, and partner support that came together for the garden. There were lots of successes, some challenges, and lessons learned. And we look forward to working with the city council and staff to determine the next step in supporting expansion of access to community gardens for Auburn residents and neighborhoods.
We'll take a couple of questions before we recess for the meeting.
Sure. I don't have any questions for you guys. I just wanted to thank all of you, all the stakeholders who helped to pull this together. It's an amazing example of what community engagement from a full spectrum of stakeholders can really do to improve a community very quickly. I'm thrilled at both the qualitative and the quantitative improvements that we've seen in such a short time, and I'm equally excited to see what we can do moving forward. I think this is an exciting pilot and something that I would really love to see in other parts of the city, because it very clearly has been a very strong success. So I just wanted to thank everyone who had a part in this project, and I hope that we can continue to see success moving forward.
Thank you.
Questions? One question I have, and I don't expect an answer, but I'm looking at Doug in his newly promoted role as a sort of helping us lead neighborhood redevelopment. I'm less interested right now as the tie-breaking vote, so I guess I can speak as someone who voted to help launch this, and how this is a pilot for community gardens, so let's go to the next one. The Webster School, Powell neighborhood, Union Street, whatever we call the neighborhood, it doesn't have a name. It hasn't embraced its own identity, and it's the neighborhood that's most challenged in Auburn from a demographic and investment standpoint. We invested in this garden. We talked earlier about investing in Hampshire Street. We've invested in the Powell Center, in the Gully. And of all those activities, the Powell Center has done a phenomenal job in engaging, in particular in our youth. This program has engaged residents who have lived in the neighborhood maybe a year, but some for longer. And I'd love to hear more about what might year 2 benchmarks be that may be more qualitative, but to help us learn more about living conditions, quality of life, things that can go spin out. Like you've convened, you were boots on the ground, you canvassed. We've never really done that at the level that this program through partnerships allowed us to. And I'd love to see us nurture those seeds even more next year to think about sort of the life that people go and live outside of the garden, and what we might be able to do as a city to enhance that more. Maybe it's a challenge to brand the neighborhood and us joining neighbors and doing that, but I'm just really impressed with what you guys have done to connect people down there.
Well, thank you. I would say I appreciate that point, and I think that we're always, certainly at the Nutrition Center, and I think and with this body of folks we brought together for the ACGI, really looking for ways to dig deeper, pun intended, and grow deeper roots. I could just go on all day. But I want to say, we did have, for example, the Nutrition Center, and we mentioned this in the earlier project, we had the Good Food Bus come there. And that was actually somewhat less successful than we were hoping in terms of bringing people, although we did have traffic there. And so we're looking at figuring out ways to continue to partner and make that, a project that works there, and figure out how to increase the activity. So we are already thinking, that project's happening, but thinking about ways that we can continue to make even more activity happen there, and what's the formula, so to speak.
My last suggestion, I'm going to look to Dennis. This was a great presentation. Perhaps we could have Brian sort of carve this out to put on our YouTube channel, and that would allow us and our partners to share on social media and encourage residents and partners to sort of hear the year-end update as a way to sort of watch the data and see the presentation as part of that. I think that'd be helpful for everybody.
The beauty of Brian recording this at this time, I don't even have to ask him, consider it done, so.
I think that Kirsten had maybe one final.
Yeah, I'll lean over, but yeah, I appreciate your point as well, Jonathan, and I think that one thing that we didn't highlight, although you did mention how spectacular Karis is, but is that the continuity, being able to invest year after year in a space really does you do start to be able to build off of success. And yeah, I think that even, we put the question out there with this project, how can it be, leveraging a lot of other resources, a lot of other volunteer capacity, and having this small thread of continuity and consistency by having a really, passionate and engaged community member is one of the pieces to that, whatever those benchmarks are. And so I could see connecting, are there other community leaders or other organizations that might want to, have events at the garden, or use some of the outreach we do at the gardens to then ask other questions. So I think there's a good opportunity to piggyback.
And just connected to that, one of our most successful stops with the Good Food Bus was actually, we did expand this year and went into Westbrook, and we had a on-the-ground community champion in partnership with Opportunity Alliance. When you pulled up the bus, it was very quiet. You didn't see people around, and all of a sudden, hordes of people would show up, and it was from the on-the-ground work of this advocate and person who was there talking to people and bringing them out. And so Karis is a great example of what that looks like tied to the garden. And we're learning in our work how important word of mouth, in our digital age where everyone's on Facebook, word of mouth is still incredibly important. And I would venture to say in that neighborhood in particular, having boots on the ground and people there to get the word out and energize people is very important. In anything that happens in that and other neighborhoods, I would say.
Thank you. Let's take a very quick 5-minute break.